Two Indian women flew to Dubai believing they were entering a world of glamour and opportunity. Instead, they stepped into a mansion built on lies, where their dreams turned into their execution. It began with a message that looked like a dream. Riya Kapoor, a travel vlogger known for her glamorous posts, and Meera Sharma, a rising fashion stylist from Mumbai, received identical emails inviting them to Dubai. The sender claimed to represent Sheikh Khalid Al Masri, a wealthy businessman looking to collaborate with Indian influencers for an exclusive luxury brand launch. The email was detailed, complete with company logos, a sleek presentation deck, and contact numbers that seemed legitimate. Both women had been struggling to break into the world of international fame, and this seemed like the golden ticket they had been waiting for. The proposal offered everything: business-class flights, a private chauffeur, and a weekend stay at the Sheikh's personal desert residence. The message described the mansion as a sanctuary of culture and elegance, and even included photos of gold-trimmed halls, infinity pools, and panoramic desert views. Meera forwarded the offer to Riya, unable to hide her excitement. The two had worked together before, sharing a friendly rivalry and mutual ambition. After a short phone call filled with laughter and disbelief, they decided to go together. The next few days were a blur of shopping, packing, and planning content ideas. They announced their upcoming luxury collaboration on social media, teasing followers with the promise of exotic experiences. Their inboxes flooded with congratulations, envy, and curiosity. The thought of meeting a real sheikh felt surreal. Neither woman noticed the small inconsistencies. The assistant's emails came from a free domain, and no official brand website could be found. But in the thrill of success, doubts were easy to ignore. As their flight tickets arrived, shining with the Emirates logo, Riya and Meera felt unstoppable. They had no idea that the journey ahead would lead straight into a nightmare. The morning of their departure felt like the start of a new chapter. Riya and Meera met at the airport dressed elegantly, their designer luggage gleaming under the lights. Cameras flashed as they filmed cheerful clips for their followers, showing boarding passes and cappuccinos. Everything appeared perfect. At the departure gate, a man in a suit approached, introducing himself as the Sheikh's personal assistant. He spoke politely, confirming their arrival details and assuring them that transport would be waiting in Dubai. The reassurance erased their last bit of hesitation. They boarded the plane full of excitement, unaware that they had just stepped into the final hours of their freedom. When they landed, the luxury was immediate. Two men in black suits stood by a silver placard bearing their names. Without saying much, the men escorted them to a waiting limousine. As they drove through Dubai's glittering cityscape, the women admired the skyline. Towers of glass, fountains of light, the promise of dreams fulfilled. But soon, the city faded behind them. The car sped down an empty desert highway, and silence filled the air. The driver ignored their polite attempts at conversation. Meera noticed the signal on her phone drop to 0. The GPS stopped working. Riya nervously laughed, telling herself it was just the desert. Hours passed, and the golden dunes stretched endlessly in every direction. The excitement that had filled their hearts slowly turned into unease. When the mansion finally appeared in the distance, it looked like something from a movie: massive gates, white domes, and shimmering torches lighting the entrance. The guards opened the doors with mechanical precision, their faces blank. As the car stopped before the palace, Riya whispered that it felt unreal. She was right, it wasn't real luxury. It was a trap. The mansion stood like a mirage in the desert, its marble pillars glowing faintly under golden lights. As Riya and Meera stepped out of the car, the air felt heavier, scented with incense and something metallic. Servants in white robes greeted them with polite bows, taking their bags and leading them inside. The interior was overwhelming. Vast halls lined with gold-trimmed mirrors, chandeliers that sparkled like frozen stars, and floors so polished they reflected every movement. A massive portrait of a man in traditional attire dominated the entrance, his expression unreadable. The women were told the sheikh was away on business, but would join them later that night. Their rooms were extravagant, each with carved furniture, velvet curtains, and intricate mosaics on the ceiling. Yet, for all its beauty, the place felt strangely silent. The staff avoided eye contact, moving with rigid precision. When Riya tried to use her phone, she discovered there was no signal. The housekeeper explained that phones were temporarily collected for privacy and security. She hesitated, but Mira insisted it was standard procedure for high-profile clients. Reluctantly, they handed them over. Dinner was served in a grand dining hall where no one spoke. Dozens of candles flickered against golden plates, reflecting in the eyes of silent servers. The food looked exquisite, but neither woman felt hungry. Every sound, the clinking of silverware, the shuffle of footsteps, echoed too loudly. When they asked about the sheikh, they were told he would arrive after midnight. Time passed slowly, the ticking of an ornate clock filling the air. Distantly, they heard faint chanting, like voices carried through the walls. Mira felt a chill crawl up her spine. The luxury no longer impressed them, it suffocated them. Something inside that mansion was wrong, and it was only beginning to reveal itself. The night stretched endlessly, and sleep refused to come. Mira lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling patterns that seemed to twist in the flickering candlelight. Restlessness pushed her to get up. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she quietly opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The mansion was silent except for the faint hum of air vents and the distant echo of footsteps that didn't seem to belong to anyone visible. The hallway walls were lined with large portraits of women dressed in elegant gowns, each painted with haunting realism. Their eyes seemed to follow her, filled with sadness and something close to fear. One painting caught Mira's attention. It showed a young woman in a red dress, her expression tense, almost lifelike. Beneath it was a brass plate that read "Guest of the Moon." She leaned closer, and for a moment, she thought she saw moisture in the woman's eyes. A sudden chill swept through her as a muffled sound came from the far end of the corridor. A cry, faint but unmistakable. Her heart pounded as she followed it to a heavy metal door with strange carvings etched into its surface. The sound came again, softer this time, like a whisper of pain. She pressed her ear against the cold metal and froze. There were voices, pleading, desperate, then abruptly cut off. Panic surged through her veins. She turned and ran back toward her room, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the stillness. Inside, Ria was half asleep until Mira shook her awake, her face pale. They tried to call for help, but their phones were gone, their luggage sealed in another room, and every window had been locked from the outside. The realization settled like ice in their chests. They weren't guests, they were prisoners. Morning arrived with blinding sunlight pouring through the heavy curtains. The sound of footsteps outside their door startled both women awake. 2 guards entered without knocking, carrying trays of food and setting them down in silence. Their blank expressions made Ria uneasy. She whispered to Mira that they should try to escape, but the hallway was full of men with earpieces. Every move was being watched. Moments later, a tall man appeared, dressed in flowing white robes, his presence commanding immediate attention. He introduced himself as Sheikh Khalid al-Masri, the host they had been waiting to meet. His voice was calm, his smile practiced, but his eyes were cold and distant. He spoke briefly about the importance of loyalty and discretion before excusing himself to prepare for the event. Yet, as he turned, Ria noticed something strange. His accent didn't sound Arabic at all. When he passed the window, sunlight glinted off his wrist, revealing a tattoo that read, "A Rahman." Mira's eyes widened. No sheikh would bear such markings. Later, while pretending to admire the artwork in the hallway, Ria saw workers unloading crates into the basement through a side door. Curiosity overpowered fear. Peering through a small gap, she saw rows of boxes filled with women's handbags, phones, and passports. Each item bore a name tag from different countries: India, Philippines, Ukraine, Kenya. Some belonged to women whose faces looked hauntingly familiar from missing persons reports she'd seen online. The horrifying truth clicked into place. The mansion wasn't a luxury residence. It was a front for a trafficking operation. The man posing as a sheikh wasn't a businessman, but a criminal running an international network. Ria and Mira weren't influencers being celebrated. They were merchandise being prepared for sale, and their turn was coming soon. Ria and Mira knew they had only one chance to survive. Every second spent in that mansion tightened the invisible chains around them. They pretended to stay calm through the day, forcing smiles as they were escorted to meals and photo sessions. Beneath the surface, they were terrified. Mira whispered that they had to escape before nightfall, before the guards became alert again. Riyah studied the mansion carefully, memorizing corridors and watching where the staff entered and exited. She noticed a small service hallway near the kitchen where deliveries seemed to arrive. That, she decided, would be their way out. When darkness fell, the mansion grew quiet except for the hum of generators. Riyah and Mira dressed in dark clothes, removing their jewelry so it wouldn't catch light. They slipped into the corridor while the guards changed shifts. The scent of roasted meat and burning candles filled the air as they crept through the narrow hall, each step measured and soundless. A single flickering bulb lit the way. The kitchen door stood ajar, and beyond it, they saw the faint outline of a delivery truck parked near the back gate. Freedom was less than 50 meters away. As they reached for the door, a heavy flashlight beam swept across the wall. A guard turned the corner. Mira froze, her breath catching. Riyah acted on instinct, grabbing a knife left on a counter. She slashed a power cord, sparks exploding into the air, plunging the corridor into darkness. Alarms blared instantly. In the chaos, they bolted through the kitchen and into the night. Barefoot, they ran across the cold sand, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Behind them, shouts erupted and engines roared to life. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, offering both hope and horror in equal measure. The desert wind cut across their faces as Riyah and Mira stumbled through the dunes, the mansion's lights shrinking behind them. Every breath felt like fire, every step sinking into soft sand that slowed them down. They didn't know where they were going, only that they couldn't stop. The night sky was vast and empty, offering no direction, only silence broken by the distant roar of engines. The guards were coming. Flashlights swept across the dunes like predatory eyes. Mira tripped, scraping her knees, but Riyah pulled her up, whispering for her to keep running. Fear gave them strength, but exhaustion clawed at their bodies. By dawn, the horizon glowed faintly pink, revealing nothing but endless desert. Their footprints stretched behind them like a trail of doom. Riyah spotted what looked like a small shack or outpost in the distance, and they dragged themselves toward it. But before they could reach it, two black SUVs appeared from behind a dune, closing in fast. The sound of tires crushing sand grew louder, the vehicles circling like hunters surrounding prey. Riyah and Mira froze, their legs too weak to move. Within seconds, armed men stepped out, shouting orders neither of them understood. They were grabbed roughly, their wrists tied and blindfolds forced over their eyes. The smell of gasoline and sand filled their senses. As they were shoved into the back of a vehicle, Mira cried softly, her voice trembling with disbelief. Riyah tried to speak, but a hand pushed her head down. The drive back felt endless. When the blindfolds were finally removed, they were back at the mansion, the same golden gates looming ahead. The sheikh was waiting, sitting calmly as if he had been expecting them all along, his expression unreadable and his verdict already decided. The morning sun burned across the marble courtyard, casting long shadows from the palace walls. Riyah and Mira were forced to kneel on the cold stone, their wrists bound and faces streaked with dust and tears. Around them stood a circle of guards, silent and expressionless. The sheikh appeared moments later, dressed immaculately in white, his steps unhurried. He looked down at the two women with detached calm, as though deciding the fate of something insignificant. Without saying a word, he signaled one of the guards to bring forward a small case. Inside it were two thin envelopes, their passports. He flipped them open briefly before tossing them into a brazier nearby. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Their identities were gone. The sheikh spoke softly to one of his men, his tone measured and final. The guard nodded and lifted a weapon. Mira screamed, begging for mercy, her voice cracking in the hot air. Riyah tried to reach for her, but the guards held her down. The sheikh turned away, uninterested in the scene unfolding behind him. Two sharp cracks broke the stillness, echoing through the courtyard like the snapping of bones. The sound was followed by silence, so deep it felt eternal. The bodies were quickly wrapped in white linen, the fabric absorbing the dark stains that spread too fast. The guards carried them out to the waiting SUV, their movements mechanical, as if rehearsed. Within minutes, the vehicles drove off, leaving behind the scent of gunpowder and smoke. By the time the sun climbed higher, no trace of what had happened remained. The marble was washed clean. Servants resumed their duties. The mansion stood as it always did, silent, golden, and perfect, hiding the truth buried beneath its flawless surface. Weeks later, the desert surrendered its secret. A group of foreign hikers exploring near Al-I noticed something unusual in the sand. Two half-buried shapes, wrapped in decayed linen. At first, they thought it was debris from a construction site, but when one of them brushed away the sand, a pale hand emerged. Panic rippled through the group as they realized they had found bodies. The authorities were alerted, and forensic teams arrived within hours. Under the relentless sun, investigators carefully uncovered what was left of two women, their remains preserved by the desert's dry heat. Jewelry fragments and pieces of embroidered fabric hinted at their identities. News of the discovery spread quickly, both in Dubai and across the border in India. The victims were soon identified through dental records as Riya Kapoor and Meera Sharma. Their disappearance had already caused an uproar online, where fans had been speculating about their vanishing after the sudden halt of their social media activity. Now the truth was grimly confirmed. Local police traced the women's last known location to the Sheikh's mansion, but when they arrived, it stood empty. The gates were open, the servants gone, and every security camera had been removed. Inside, investigators found traces of hurried evacuation, half-packed boxes, abandoned clothing, and burned documents. The basement revealed the most chilling evidence: rows of confiscated passports, cosmetics, and personal items from dozens of missing women of different nationalities. There were no signs of the sheikh or his associates. Every name used in the business contracts led to shell companies and fake identities. What had seemed like a luxurious empire was nothing more than a front for human trafficking. The truth sent shockwaves through international media, but the men behind it had vanished into thin air. Months passed, but the horror of what happened to Riya and Meera refused to fade. Their faces appeared on news broadcasts, social media posts, and investigative documentaries across the world. Public outrage grew as more stories surfaced. Other young women from India, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe who had received similar invitations and were never seen again. The so-called Sheikh network became a term whispered across borders, symbolizing one of the most sophisticated human trafficking rings ever exposed. Yet, despite international warrants and coordinated raids, no trace of the fake sheikh or his accomplices was ever found. It was as if they had vanished into the desert wind. Back in Mumbai, Riya's and Meera's families turned their grief into a fight for justice. Their parents appeared in interviews, pleading for stronger cybercrime monitoring and safety regulations for influencers traveling abroad. Activists launched awareness campaigns warning others about fake brand deals and international scams. Airlines and embassies began implementing stricter verification systems for sponsored trips. Slowly, their deaths began shaping global reforms. But behind the progress lay a shadow of fear. Travelers began second-guessing glamorous offers, and influencer agencies tightened their security measures. Every new invitation carried a hint of doubt, a ghost of what had happened to the two women who trusted too easily. The mansion in the desert remained abandoned, swallowed by sand and silence. Locals claimed they sometimes saw faint lights flickering at night or heard soft music drifting from its empty halls. Whether rumor or truth, it became a place of warning, a symbol of how easily ambition can be manipulated. Riya and Meera's story was no longer just a tragedy. It was a lesson carved into memory, reminding the world that not all opportunities glitter, and some dreams come at the cost of life itself.